Heard a lot about this show, the ex-candidates.
These institutions which we've been told to respect and trust are actually completely untrustworthy.
Have you confirmed that you are negative before attending tonight if you are unvaccinated?
I still see people with masks on and driving, and they're in the car by themselves.
So you can pay my electricity bill, you thinking that was fair.
We're teaching them about what it means to be a pansexual instead of teaching them how to do your taxes.
It's no for me. I say no to the voice.
So we've talked a lot about equipment. Now the big threat is China. Everyone's talking about, China's a threat, and I think we kind of are in a little bit of a conflict with China in other ways, not military sort of ways like COVID sort of. They're buying a lot of our farmland, and there's other things going on, blah blah blah. But if we hypothetically got someone in Parliament like Adam Zahra, who's a common sense sort of guy, and he called you up and he said, "Look, Alistair, the ADF have lost the plot. The leadership there is just not up to the job. We want to put you in charge. How do we defend Australia?" And I guess one of the things about living here in Australia, we've been blessed that we've never been invaded before. We have been attacked by Japan, but there's never been a land invasion or anything like that. So we're kind of untested when it comes to those sorts of things. What's your opinion from a strategic point of view about having to defend Australia?
What do we need?
What do we need? Long-range missiles, big ones, and lots of them. If we buy, say, 50 of them, we're wasting our time. If you have a look at the numbers that have been fired by Russia and by Ukraine in that minor war there, they're up to the thousands already. And if we're not stocked up, now I don't know if you realise actually that there's another weapon I want to mention. Actually, that's HIMARS, and HIMARS actually is the another game-changing artillery weapon because it can fire up to about 60 kilometres. And what you have is a drone spots the target, and then you fire. Now let's say the target thinks, "Oh shit, I think we've been spotted. We better move." You can actually direct the artillery shell to change course. It's got fins on the tail. It's got a little computer. You can actually make it change course to hit a moving target. Once it locates that target, it will actually follow the target.
Is that the?
It's a smart weapon. That's a smart weapon, right?
Yes, it is.
So that sounds like the playbook from Tony Stark from Iron Man kind of thing, Like we need one of those guys on the books, I reckon.
Yeah. No, look, I recommend it, and it's a free book. You can go and download Unchain Australia. Just read the first chapter, the 41 pages. That's Michael Darby's book. But Michael's a clever guy, actually, because what he does is he doesn't write any of it. He gets everyone else to write a chapter for him, including Malcolm Roberts, who wrote the chapter on climate. And as I said, I wrote 5 of the chapters in there. But the first one there was the one on defence. And I said, who are we going to fight? How are we going to fight them? What do we need to fight them with? And I went through these things. Now, I'll give you an example there. We had no plans to buy HIMARS. And in fact, there is nothing on the purchasing list right now that says this new weapon has now proven itself to be absolutely superb. We should actually, it's Unchained Australia 2, number 2. That's the first book.
That's the first one.
That's worth reading too. It's about 500 pages. But the HIMARS actually is a new weapon there. So we'll better get a committee together in Canberra, several committees. And we'll have to have the occupational health and safety, and we'll have to look at the gender diversity of this and the effect this weapon would have on climate change. And we actually have departments that now do this. If I get posted to one of these...
Maybe we can just buy it, paint it in rainbow colours, turn the wheels square, and then say that it fits all the categories that it needs to do, and then hopefully that it doesn't pass the occupational health and safety because we actually need those things to kill things.
Oh, that's it. Where's my colouring book? I need my colouring book.
Yeah.
The thing about HIMARS was that the Singaporeans, who have a very small place to defend, But they've actually got more weapons than we have. I don't know if you know that. That small island has more tanks, more artillery, more aircraft, and more weapons than we have. And it goes back to Lee Kuan Yew, and he said, "We want to be the poison prawn of Asia.
Yeah.
We can't stop you eating us, but you won't enjoy what you've just eaten."
Yes.
So that's his attitude, and they will fight. And of course, he was surrounded by a very aggressive Indonesia at one stage. Malaysia wasn't happy with him, and so he had these two big neighbours actually who were not particularly happy with him. And so he decided that if you're going to sit between these two giants compared to us, we better be poisonous. And that's what he arranged with his defence force. Now, the reason I brought that up was that they've been watching the war in Ukraine and anywhere else there's a war. They've looked at Karabakh, and they've also got drones now. And they looked at the HIMARS and ordered them, I think, about last June. And they've already had the delivery of the first ones. Now, we haven't even got a committee together, or multiple committees, to decide on, are these things really green? What's the effect on the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? No, we don't do any of that. So we haven't even started on this track yet. The whole thing, as I mentioned, is the main problem is structural. I've been asked by several interesting people, actually, well, what would you do? And I said, well, there was a number of fairly high-profile people were put into, say, something like DMO as the CEO, and all left within 2 years, having not been able to change a thing, being defeated by the system. I'm on it, boss, so I'll get that. I must admit, I did this myself. I had a boss who was very annoying because he kept asking me to do things I didn't particularly want to do. So one of the things to do was to actually put something on his desk, a 678-page participation awards parade through Sydney at some stage there for everyone who didn't serve anywhere or do anything. And so we need your particular advice on this. And here's a 678 page. That would keep him busy for weeks. And so what you do is you drown them. And there's a very good film called The Pentagon Wars. Not The Pentagon Papers, The Pentagon Wars. You should watch it. And when this officer says, I need to see everything to do with this vehicle, which happened to be the Bradley. And so the two guys say, we can't show them everything. We've got all these things we're hiding. And the general comes around and says, give them everything. And I mean everything. So the guy goes back to his office one day and he can't get through the door because it's stacked from floor to ceiling with files. So that what they're going to do is just drown them in, minusculely. And that's exactly what they do. Don't worry about the fact we're buying the Abrams tank and it's useless, it's just become a target. Don't worry about the fact the F-35 can't take off unless Lockheed says it can. Don't worry about the frigates being now destroyers. We need you to consider whether or not we should have another award for those that didn't participate in anything. This is the most important thing. And we need you to actually take that, we put you on the Gender Diversity Committee and the Green Woke Carbon Dioxide Committee. And so what you do is just bury them in all these trivial things. At one stage, actually, it's not a particular rebel, I'm not. I'm really just a really nice guy who just found the system annoyed me a bit. I had to put in all these returns, strength returns, equipment returns, everything. Training returns, how many projectionists does your unit have? Was one of the things I had to put in monthly. It never changed. But you had to have it filed monthly. So that kept somebody in Canada busy collecting my piece of paper from the maybe 500 units in the Army and Navy and Air Force and then filing them all away somewhere where they'd never be seen again. It kept them busy. So one day I decided not to send in any report. None. Zero. And see what the reaction was when your report was late. Now, of course, some of them did get reactions. Not always pleasant for me, but sorry. Must be my clock has failed me again. Never did. Never gave excuses. Oh, we've just been busy. We've never got around to it. I'll fill it out now. And I discovered that I only had to fill out between 20 and 30% of all reports ever. 20% called up and said, "Where's your report?" And then later on, someone said, "We haven't a report from you for 6 months. You know, how many people have you got in your unit?" Oh, you want the strength report? Okay, I better give it to you now. So I got up to about 30%, and 70% just disappeared, never to be heard of again. Quangos.
Wow. So
And
that's pointless. It's just bureaucracy.
well, it is. I mean, so I just decided not to fill out any of these things. And by the way, all the company. Sorry,
I've got a question for you. Go, Stephen. It's all right.
No, we're just getting back to defending Australia and China now. Obviously, a big difference between the two countries is population. And I heard somewhere that China have a military force of 1 million on the ground soldiers, which is a small comparison compared to their overall population. Now, if we go back and look at the end of World War II, one of the strategies was to bring in immigration, because I think the population of Australia at that time was about 7 million. And the leaders at the time were thinking, well, if we have to fight another war, we're going to have to increase our population. Is that such a big thing in modern warfare these days? Is numbers on the ground play a big role, or is that kind of...
No. It used to be when you were charging into machine guns and losing 20,000 a day. For Mel's, we lost 5,500 in one night for a very, very bad plan. It's the greatest loss we've actually had. No, actually, you've got two things here. If you have good generals with good strategy, and they're fighting an asymmetric war against a much more powerful enemy, then you have not only a chance, you can probably actually win. Have a look at the Israelis. How come a population of 9 million, 3 million of which are not actually Jews, so there's only 2/3 of them in that country are actually Jewish and therefore liable for service. Others can volunteer, but they're generally not sent to frontline units. And they're taking on about 300 million Arabs all around them, from Syria who hate them, Lebanon who harm them, hate them. Then you've got Egypt, who they've fought several wars with, who are now fairly friendly with them. You've got Iraq, who tried to invade them once and tried to shell them when Saddam was in power. That's why they developed Iron. Oh, by the way, Iron Dome was actually developed in a Hewlett-Packard style. A couple of engineers developed it in the garage. Came up with the whole concept, the guidance system, and how to actually track missiles using the parabola, and actually built something better than the billions of dollars that the Americans paid for the Patriot. And the Americans are now using the Iron Dome as well as their own.
Wow.
I mean, they've got different functions, but the Iron Dome is very effective by comparison. It kills more incoming rockets than Patriot does. So anyway, what you've got there is a small population there who have to fight a high-tech war, and they have to do a lot of it behind the scenes. And if they do get into a battle, they have to be able to win. And sometimes, as happened in 1973, they had to stand in front of the spear point, and just take it on head on. They took a lot of casualties, and I think they lost about 2,000 dead in 1973, which is more than even the 1947-48 war, or Six-Day War, which is under 500. So that was a huge shock to them, given the numbers there. They have to kill, I think it's something like 50 to 1. And then, of course, when you're down to the last man standing, you're faced with 50 Arabs. That's not going to work out very well. So they can still win the wars. In fact, they're regarded as the most powerful force there. And how do they do it? Their intelligence services are absolutely superb. I mean, some of the things that Mossad gets up to and how they do it is it's worth putting into film. Not Hollywood these days, but into film or books. But in fact, they don't tell you much about what's going on there. Their intelligence services actually keeps them well ahead. They've actually managed to destroy the Iranian nuclear program 3 times already. It might even be more than that. And of course, they had the Stuxnet virus, which actually caused all the things to speed up and blow up, and killed quite a lot of people in the underground place where they were making plutonium. So they're staying ahead of the game there, but it comes down to the crunch. What will they do when someone finds out that they've either borrowed a bomb from North Korea or they've managed to develop one themselves? What will the Israelis do? And that's something that's been talked about at high levels in Israel, in America, in NATO. And in fact, Obama said he would order the Fifth Fleet to stop Israeli jets getting to Iran. Now, that is, almost treasonable. How can one country say to another, you to stop someone loading up his nuclear bomb to come and take out Tel Aviv? And I will shoot down your planes if I have to. And by the way, you're an ally of ours. But that was a statement by Obama, which is just downright stupid. But then again, that zombie we've got in the White House now.
Biden. He's a drone.
Well, he's a drone, yeah. He can't even read a teleprompter properly. And the people behind them are just about as bad or worse. America's almost a failed state. They can't even run an election.
Yeah. Alistair, I have a question for you regarding China. So
yes.
We know that Australia, we should have one of the best militaries. We should have the best equipment. We should have the best of everything in the world, because Australia is basically one of the most energy-rich, resource, beautiful countries in the world. And basically every other country in the world are envious of us because we should really be a hole in the ground with everything stripped out of us. That's the way I see Australia, as in why we should protect it, because we've got uranium, we've got coal, we've got gas, we've got everything that the world, gold, silver, we've got everything. So when in a military context, with what we've spoken about for the last hour and a half, what would Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, tyrant, what would he be saying? What would he be thinking? Would he be there doing the Mr. Burns kind of, let's just see these guys fold and let's just walk on in and take everything out of the ground? What would his mental state be like towards Australia?
He'd like to buy it. He doesn't have to. We've got such poor laws that, unlike the Malaysian Bumiputra system, where I can't buy land. I can buy a condo in Vietnam, but I can't buy land. I can buy a block in the sky, but I can't buy physical land. And that was one of the reasons, actually, the expatriate landlords was why the Communist Party got going in 1927, because most of the big landlords were all living in France. And the poor old bloody peasants were working away, and so that got them started. It took them a while to win the war, but now, of course, they've passed a law that yes, I can come in. In fact, I can open a business there, but I need to have a partner who's Vietnamese. Now, I can't buy land, but I can rent, or I can actually buy into a condo, for instance. For the type of business I do, my office is my home. Anyway, so it wouldn't really matter. But for people who actually want to do that thing, because they want to protect their sovereignty. There were riots in Vietnam when they discovered that the Politburo had actually rented out Da Nang, Hue, to the Chinese government, the port of Hue. And that caused riots there. Why did we fight a war against the Chinese for 864 years to get them out of the place? And now you let them rent it for 99 years. And one of the Politburo members had to step down because he was the guy who signed off on it. But he was he survived. He's probably still quite wealthy, but sent off to the back blocks there for that little deal. But the Chinese have invested a lot in things like hotels. They can't own the land, but they can own the hotel. They can own things there. They don't own any of the infrastructure, factories, or these sort of things. They're not allowed to do that. That has to be owned by the Vietnamese, or in fact, I can show you some very good roads that I drive up to Saigon on, 8-lane highways, and they're boot schemes. Build, own, operate, and transfer. So you get a 30-year lease to build this road, put tolls on it, get your money back, and get out. And a lot of that, we actually, Australia actually built one of the bridges there as an aid project, and it has a toll on it. They're just taking the money, but we gave them the money to actually build the bridge over the Mekong. And I travel on that on the way to Saigon. The thing is there that we have sold off Murray-Darling so that when the next drought comes along, believe me, there will be another drought. And when that comes along and water's short, the Cubby Station, which is the largest rice farm in Australia, is owned by the Chinese. It will get all the water. We're not building any dams. As some clown once said, dams only store water, they don't make it. Yes, I thought that was the purpose. That was it. By the way, that was the Minister for Water in Victoria. We've sold off a number of ports, Darwin being one of them. We've rented it out. We sold off a fairly defunct iron ore mine of poor quality in Cockatoo Island, but it happens to be right next to our largest training area for the military. Who owns it? The Chinese, and there's lots of aerials hanging off there now. We've obviously got to transmit and listen to things from everywhere around. You've got Keswick Island in New South Wales, which against the rules that were given, they lopped the top off the hill and put lots of aerials on top of it. And it's of course next to another training area for the military. They tried to buy Melbourne Ports, and Dan Andrews under his Belt and Road initiative would have sold it to them.
Yeah,
happily
with a big smile on his face.
Sorry?
He would have done it happily with a big smile on his face.
So what you've got there is that, and by the way, they have an investment in an iron mine. This is the one that Clive Palmer has been fighting with. And they built an airstrip there that can actually take bombers.
Yeah.
If you want to land something like a 747 on a bare-base airstrip in the middle of northwest Western Australia, 9 kilometres from the mine, why do they need to build something that? Oh, we're going to bring in a lot of big equipment. Never been used for any big equipment, but it's there, and it can be used, and it's a privately owned airstrip. It's not used by the RAAF.
That's the one in Northern Territory you were saying, isn't it?
No. It's in Western Australia.
Oh, that one's in Western Australia. Okay, because that was a big advertising part of his advertising campaign.
It was
during the federal election. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, he did that. He showed that as one of the things there. They actually changed the law to rob. I don't have much time to fly, but they changed the law to rob Clive what he was entitled to. They backdated the law, and I can't understand how he didn't win the case against the West Australian government. So what you've got is, I've got an article I'm going to write for Quadrant called Why Democracy Doesn't Work. Because you guys just need to tell enough lies, promise everything to everyone, empty the whole treasury into people's pockets, get elected, and then do whatever you want. As soon as you get the 51% in Parliament, and that's what we've got here in Victoria, Dan's just ignored everyone in Parliament. He just had one last session to pass through a few things that he wanted, and he didn't even need to use any of the independents, as they call them, or the Teals or the Greens or anyone. He's now got a majority in his own right. Same in Western Australia, where you don't even have an opposition anymore. The guy there went so far woke left, he destroyed the Liberal Party in one foul stroke. Yeah. And it was a foul stroke. And so when you have a look around the place, all these tyrants, that's what we've got under democracy.
Isn't that why really and you look at places like America and Australia, we're not really democracies. We have separation of powers, and we have the Westminster system here in Australia. So you don't have these situations where 51% of the population can vote to kill the other 49%. There's actually laws and structures.
They do all the time. Yeah. No, actually, see, one of the interesting things in America is that many of the candidates, be they Democratic or Republican, are elected on local issues. And for instance, in 2016, when Trump got elected, they also had the election for the local state senator in West Virginia. It's a coal mining area. Now, Hillary had turned up there and said, we're getting out of coal mining. You guys are all going to get jobs in wind power. And all these coal miners just shook their heads and said, no, that ain't going to happen.
No.
But the Democratic guy came along and said, listen, don't worry about what she said, but what you need is a voice actually counteracting what she said, and I'm your voice because I'm in the Democratic Party, and you've always voted for me, and I've always stood up for West Virginia. So if they try to cut down, destroy the coal mining industry, in, I'll have a voice inside the Democratic Party, and I will use it to actually save your jobs and save the industry. He got elected because he was actually crying out his disloyalty to the Democratic Party. So you've got Joe Manchin and you've got others who you've just got Samina, whatever her name is, who's just actually changed sides. So unlike in Australia, where you get into one party, you generally vote whatever that party says, whether you like it or not. Whereas in America, these people tend to actually vote more on local issues that suit the local issues from where they were elected. And that's much more democratic in that way. So even though you've got, say, 52 members, you might have to persuade someone there to actually, be part of your view, to actually get your ideas through. And that doesn't happen in Australia. We're very much a party discipline system in Australia.
Well, especially the Labor Party, if you step out of line, then you're pretty much done, aren't you? You have to vote along party lines.
Yeah. By the way, 10 years ago, it is 10 years ago now, I started writing a manifesto, and I sent it around to every party that was around at the time, all the Conservative parties. I didn't send them to the Greens or anything. And I said, look, there are 22 of you, and you don't have, that's not quite true, you have 2 members in Parliament out of 22 parties. You've got to change your ways. And here's how I suggest you do it. So I came up with a list. I said there'd be about 100 items. I didn't get to 100. I just gave a sample of about 30 items and said, what would you vote on, say, immigration? No immigration, 0. Open doors, 5. You put down where you stand on this issue, and I'll add it all up and see where you are on the Conservative stream. And I went down with a couple of contentious issues like abortion. And one of the Christian parties actually pointed out that if anyone said abortion for any reason, even though the mother was going to die, they wouldn't support it. They would rather see a Green or a Labour Party member or the Liberal Party get in, but they couldn't, in all conscience, even vote for anyone that had other than 0 in that box. And so what I realised was that in about 85% of issues, these 22 parties agreed with each other. But there was always a showstopper where I would rather see a teal get in than you, because you have a showstopper for me. I'd rather see them get in, even though I don't know what their policies are, and they say they're independent. I know they're not, but anyway, I'd rather do that. And they were all cutting each other's throats. So I came up with a plan there that you exchange your preferences between each other, and you might not get up, Stephen. You might not get up, Adam, but someone from the Conservative side will get up. And we don't know who it is. And you can look at that because the guy actually was doing that. That's the election whisperer. And he actually got Ricky Muir in, who started off with 0.5% of the primary vote.
Yeah.
But he was actually ahead of someone, and he got their preference, and so it built up until he was actually a senator. So it could be done. Now, the interesting thing is, although I called some of these people and didn't get any sense out of them, I did get one letter back, and that was from Family First. It wasn't Bob Davis, the other senator they had. Now, he's from Victoria. He lives quite near me. And I met up with him, and he pointed out that there was just no way that these people were going to get together. And so if you happen to be in One Nation, then you're going to find that there will be other Conservatives out there who will not vote for you because of your racist policies, which don't exist in the way, but that's beside the point. That's the way you've been tarred.
Yeah.
We had a One Nation person down here in my electorate who wanted to stand for One Nation that didn't. She was Chinese, which I thought was amusing. I didn't even know she was a member of the party, but she said if she was standing for a party, she'd stand for One Nation.
we get a lot of support from other like from a lot of migrated people, immigrants and stuff like that. Most of my supporters were like came from South Africa. So you know, I've got coloured people, and we've got people from India. I've got like a whole plethora of different supporters, far more than just your typical just Australian supporter. I mean, I have a few of them too, but most of them are basically immigrate from immigrants.
And Adam, I forgot to tell you, but a guy that I work with is from Taiwan, and he voted for you.
Oh, really?
He lives in Macarthur, and he voted for you at the federal election. It's gone out of my mind. I've known him for years, but he voted for your last election.
Tell him I said good day.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, but
look, I mean, well, my wife's Vietnamese, but she can't stand the Greens or Labour or anything that's to the left of Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
And so she finds you guys a bit pinko.
Pink and purple.
Not red, but just pink. Anyway,
yeah.
So I mean, she's actually very strongly conservative and would vote for someone there. And she actually looks at the problem we've had here in Victoria with the Somalis and the Sudanese, and would absolutely vote for zero immigration because some of her friends actually live in areas that are terrorised by these gangs, and they can't go out at night. And so, I mean, these people went into the poorer areas and terrorised the workers. I'll tell you the interesting story. I handed out how to vote cards for United Australia Party at the last election against Dan. And less than 10% of people who walked past would take a how to vote card.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it was just because of Clive. I don't think they know Clive. And this is a working class suburb. And I thought that given the disaster of the COVID lockdowns that we've had here with the pandemic Dan, that these people would have been leaping to get rid of him. In fact, you might have seen his vote actually increased in his own seat of Mulgrave, which I was hoping Mr. Cook would get up, saying he got robbed by Dan and Slug Sutton.
Sluggate.
And that court case is worth $50 million against Sutton and the government. However, here's a working class suburb in which people actually voted in the Labour guy again. And I don't know if he got an increased majority. I couldn't bring myself to look. But by 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
He did have a big swing against him, and you got to take your hat off to Dan Andrews.
Dan did have a swing against him.
Yeah. He had a swing against him.
Yeah. But he was well, to be I'll try and quickly look it up, but we were touching on
I thought his primary vote went up.
Well, let's have a look. But I know a lot of the swings in Victoria, like the Labor Party had 10 to 15% swings against them, but they still held on because they had such a healthy seat to begin with. So I'll quickly look that up.
No, they didn't really. I mean, they actually needed the Sex Party, or the Reason Party, as they call themselves now. They needed that swinging vote, and if it wasn't for her swinging vote, it wasn't she swings with. But if I didn't have her vote, we wouldn't have had the what was the law that he brought in, the omnivorous law. Omnivorous is the right word, where you can do anything. The what do you call that?
The emergency power law.
Oh, the emergency powers law.
Yeah.
She was a swinging vote that got that across the bar. But then again, I mean, I think it's not so much that anyone even thought Dan Andrews was worth being called human. I think it's a case of they looked at the opposition from the Liberal Party, which is just beyond hopeless.
So it's got 8.5% swing against Dan Andrews in the primary vote, and then a 5. Yeah. So and then I still don't understand why they have the Liberal Party member ahead of Ian Cook when Ian Cook came second in the primary vote. Then it should be
Depends who got the preferences. Depends who got the preferences.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe that's it. But the
because
Liberal Party had
two-party
an 11% swing against them. So
because two-party preferred is always Liberal and Labor. That's why you need your scrutineers in the counting booths, mate, because they don't even if you're getting more than the Liberal or Labor, right? They still count only Liberal and Labor, and then everything else goes into another pile.
anyway, Alistair, we're coming to the end now, but I just want to ask you one more question. I know Adam wanted to touch on this as well. We hear about, you were just talking about democracies. We hear a lot about fascism and socialism, communism, and all these different types of authoritarian systems. The way that it was once explained to me is fascism is like all the corporations kind of merging together to take over government, whereas socialism is the government taking over all the corporations. Can you maybe explain it in your own words and let us know what the differences are between the different systems?
Well, you obviously haven't read the book Political Systems, which was written in 1971, which I have, in fact, recently read again for the second time. No, fascism and communism or socialism are basically the same thing. The only difference...
Well, actually, sorry, the one thing I left out was even though there are those differences, you get the same result.
Not quite, you don't.
Okay.
I'll come back to that why. And why actually fascism is a better system than communism, believe it or not. What happens there is that both of them are National Socialist, and the Nazi Party, of course, was a National Socialist Party. And the difference there is that the communists have a totally global view, whereas the fascists have a nationalistic view. So when the fascists took over in, say, Italy, now what Mussolini did as one of his first acts in 1923 was call a conference of all the big industrialists and said, you're now working for the government, but in return, the government will make you even richer than you currently are. But here's what we want you to do. And so what you had was that they were trying to build the economy and build the defense forces and do all of those sort of things. But the government, the DMO, the Defense Material Organization, was now allocating out contracts to various companies who were now supporting the government. So yes, the government actually had control over who did what and how much they would do, but they actually looked after them at the same time, made them extremely rich. Now, on the other hand, when he got to Germany, he did exactly the same thing. In fact, it was the industrialists who put Hitler into power. And they thought they could control him. That turned out to be a bad move. But in the end, of course, they were quite happy with what they'd actually got because they got all the big contracts and everything else. Now, you then go to Russia, which took the opposite approach of socialism, where they took everything. They were the Klaus Schwab of this world. They took everything off everybody and said it's all owned by the government. So nobody had any motivation to actually work very hard. And of course, the economy tanked immediately. And it's always been tanked ever since until, of course, they opened up again and sold off their losing businesses to the so-called oligarchs, basically on a song and a prayer. But a lot of those businesses turned around. A lot of people made a lot of money out of it. And so what you've now got is places like, not so much China. China is very much a government-controlled system. They allow some capitalism at the bottom end. So if you want to make teddy bears, no problem. If you want to make tanks, it's done by the government. It's done by organizations chosen by the government. Vietnam actually then took the approach that after being subsidized by Russia and finding out that socialism wasn't working, all this thing we've been waiting for 60 years wasn't working, they opened up a thing called Dui Moi, which was open for business. And they then invited companies like Ford to come and actually manufacture motor vehicles in Vietnam. And they actually set the factory up there, didn't have the equipment in it, and then the American government actually kiboshed the idea and said, no, you're not going to be allowed to do that. We're still in the bad book for beating us in the war. The Motorola opened a factory in, they're not American, opened a factory in Hanoi and ran that for many years until Motorola tanked because of bad products. That's something quite separate from what they were doing. So a number of companies actually moved in to Vietnam, sponsored by the government and looked after by the government, provided you stay within certain rules and we get our cut. There's a very good winemaker called Dalat Wines. Look it up. The building they're in is magnificent. It was built in the 1880s by the French, and they laid out all these wines because they wanted to have their own wine grown in Vietnam. It's up in the mountains, so it's quite cool. And at the end of when the Americans arrived, they had no idea what to do with it, so they just abandoned it, went on to the war somewhere else. And the ornithologist actually fled the country in 1975 and went to France. And he told his son about this place. His son went back, found this magnificent building derelict, and vines that had been there for nearly 100 years. And so he said to the government, "I'd like to reopen this and make wine here and sell it." And the government said, "Fine. We'll put in $1 and take 50%. You put in the rest." So they took 50% of it, and ended up he had to put up all the money for all the wines and everything else, and started off the business, which is now very successful. He has got a problem actually. He makes wines in the French taste, which is not for the Australian taste. We can't sell them in Australia. They've got a couple of good wines you can buy in Australia, but mostly you'd rather suck lemons, which is basically the definition of French wine.
Yeah, bitter.
Not nice. They use a thing called Cardinal grape, which has got a sort of perfume taste. Doesn't suit Australians either.
So, can you explain why you get the same outcome with fascism and socialism and communism as well?
Well, you don't. You don't get the same outcome.
Okay.
Fascism was actually very successful, provided they don't go off the rails, as Hitler did. Fascism was actually quite successful in turning a derelict economy around from 1933, when he started the first Autobahn, when he took over, to the time he was able to go to war with a massive army and a huge industry. And he did that in 6 years. Now, at the end of World War II, Japan actually started up, I've forgotten the name of it now, but they actually chose 7 industries that they would get into. The government had very little money, and the whole country was devastated, and almost nothing left there. One of them was get back into heavy industry, and this is the things we'll invest in. So they started something actually that's come out of one of the parties there. They started a postal bank. People put the money in there, and you got higher interest rates, and you didn't pay tax on the money that was deposited there. So you got some interest back. So that became very popular, and they used that to finance infrastructure and buying and building these industries. Now that was 1945. They actually started this in 1947. By 1955, we were back on the records as one of the powerful industrial countries of the world. Now, when I first went back to Vietnam, I got electricity for 7 hours a day. Why 7? Because it doesn't divide into 24. You either got electricity from midnight till 7, or the next day you got it from 3 till 10, and then 6 till whatever. So, and that was the state of the country, and the roads were terrible, and everything was there. It's now, I think it's rated, you can look it up, I think it's the 21st largest economy in the world. And we're not using it by counting the number of baristas, which if we count coffee shops in Australia, we would actually be out there with the leaders. They're actually making things.
Yeah.
And I watch out of my condo window, I see up to 60 container ships a day passing by, going into Phu Mai or Saigon to drop off the goods and pick up goods for export. 60 a day. Now, tell me how many are going into Sydney Harbour per day, or Brisbane, or Melbourne.
Well, a lot will be coming in. A lot come in, but everything goes out empty because we don't ship anything out.
Yeah. Well, the other things we ship out are in iron ore ships or bulk carriers. Yeah. So they go out in bulk carriers. But it's quite right. That's one of the costs of actually bringing things in. But I doubt if we would have, in fact, I know we don't have 60 ships a day coming into Melbourne. Well, 60 ships a month come in. But if I drive over Westgate Bridge, I can count the ships lined up. There's maybe 5 or 6 at any given time.
Far out.
And that's it. We'd probably get maybe 30 or 40 ships a month coming into Melbourne to supply the 10 million people around Melbourne, whereas I'm getting 60 ships a day going under my window. By the way, the first one that went past, I rushed out, got the camera and took a picture of it. And here's another one. I took a picture of that too. I stopped fairly soon.
Yeah, because then you're like, oh, it's a daily occurrence. You can set your clock to it.
Yeah, well, the great thing is because the channels are very close together and they're 1 kilometre offshore. And so when you get 3 ships, 2 going one way and 1 going the other way, that's worth taking a photo of. And some of the ships are very big. It dredged the channel there. So anyway, here's countries that have actually managed to turn themselves around now. If you ask me, I would say that right now, Vietnam is a fascist country. The government actually controls what you can do, what industries you're going to be in, and if you're going to have an export industry that will bring in foreign dollars, they actually turned up at my place when I retired. But I had to fill out these forms to get residency there. And I came home one day. I've got a motorbike. I came home, and Marie was sitting there talking to well-dressed guys. And who were these? And one was an older man, probably about 45 or something, and young assistant there. And they said, and asked me in perfect English, said, "Oh, your wife been telling me about the business you used to run?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'm retired now." And then I almost had to get therapy because he actually said to me, "We're from the government. What can we do to help you restart your business here? We'll give you an office, we'll give you a secretary, we'll provide anything you need if you'll just reopen your business there." And I needed the smelling salts.
Yeah.
We need them hearing about this.
I really thought about it. I really want to go back to work, but I need more money. No, I don't. So I didn't actually do anything about it, but I will one day. I'll finish off this chess book I'm writing now, and then I might go back and actually do something about that. I devised one of the best project management systems in the world. In fact, it was the best. It was actually used by the oil industry. And I need to redevelop that and then just upgrade it, and it would be back to being the best. There's nothing like it anywhere else. But could I get a grant in Australia to actually get some university to develop the software? Nah, too hard. And these guys are saying, software? Just tell us what you need. How many software developers do you want occupying your back room here?
Far out.
Yeah, and this is a communist country or a fascist country.
But the thing is, when it's good government, then the people benefit. It doesn't matter really. It's not so much the system used, as long as it's for the people. Is that what we're trying to stay here?
Well, yeah, because now they've got 90 million people, and don't forget. I mean, we have dinner parties probably twice a week. How can we do that? I mean, we used to have them in Australia about once a month. Because $20, I can hire a cook and a maid who will come in, set everything up, cook everything, go down to the market, get fresh squid that's still screaming, bring it up, cook all of that, and wash up afterwards, get the $20 and go home.
Yeah, why do you come back? Why do you come back to Melbourne?
Don't ask me. I've got a house here. But I might sell it soon as some pandemic stand. We built this house actually only 4 years ago. It's the only house in the whole estate that's got a lift.
Oh, wow. But you've got, but the thing is too, it's like you're not even in, I don't know, really like a super free state of Australia. You're in one of the worst kind of run states in Australia.
Well, yeah, I know, I agree with you. It so happened that when I was leaving the army, we made a deal. We had 2 kids, and another reason for leaving was my kids were moving around all the time, and I didn't see them making long-term relationships. And so I wanted to actually give them stability. So we actually said, wherever I get my first job, that's where we stay until the kids leave school. And so I happened to get my first job in Victoria, so we stayed here. Now, the rotten little sods then grew up and joined the army. Tell me what was wrong with this picture. I could have been a general.
Wow.
So anyway, they went through Duntrin and RMC. Well, RMC is Duntrin. Went through ADPA. got a couple of major degrees, and are very woke because of that sort of experience. But anyway, so the point there was that that's how we ended up in Victoria, and then I got involved in. There was an article I actually written, which was a letter I actually sent to Roger Franklin, the editor of Quadrant Online, and I was telling him about my experience with the development I had here. Which just about, I said, money doesn't worry me too much, but it's just such a hassle having all this tied up and having to deal with Mr. and Mrs. Pettifogger. And I gave him a list of the sort of things that we'd actually put up the cladding and everything else, and the building inspector came around and said, no. When you're upper floor, I want you to have a Juliet balcony. Why? The window only opens to 12 inches. Well, a 2-year-old might climb up there, how? And fall out. So just put a Juliet. Now that cost us, because we had to re-render part of the building, cost us thousands. Then they came back and said, there's a division between the two properties you put in. We'd like you to move the division by 87 centimetres. Now, why not 85 or 86 or 98? Why 87? Now, that, to get a surveyor in, Stephen, costs a fortune. So I had to get someone in to move this bloody peg. And all it is a board along the back of the wall there. It's got a peg on it. I mean, I'm sure some surveyor will be able to find it. Why they moved it it's just grass that's shared between two properties.
Yeah.
So you got that sort of pettifogger. The best one of all was NBN. Now, you don't put this on the radio, but what happened was that we were told by the council we had to be NBN capable. Okay, so we call up NBN and said, we need the cable run past the door. We're not going to take your bloody services, but we need the cable running past the door. And they said, well, that street is not on our plan for 3 years. So how do we become NBN capable? That's your problem, not ours. So we called up the ombudsman, who told them to put a cable in. Nope, wouldn't do it. Called the ombudsman again, because now I'm getting down to the deadline where I've got to get a certificate of occupancy. So eventually, 2 guys turned up with a pick and shovel and said, where do you want your cable? Anywhere on the beyond the footpath there on the verge. So they dig a hole about 3 feet deep, 9 inches wide, or about a foot wide, and about a meter long. No cable, and then dropped a lid on it with NBN on it.
That's your pit.
Just a pit.
Yeah.
And then said, sign here that you've accepted your NBN capable. And I wanted to tell him, you guys are corrupt and crooked. But then he would have taken away his sheet of paper and I wouldn't have been. So I signed off and I thought, this is bureaucratic brilliance. I've now got a hole in the ground with a lid on it, and I just paid $5,500 for it. But now I can get a certificate of occupancy and sell this bloody place and get out of here.
Yeah.
And but you're NBN certified. You're capable now.
Correct.
But there's nothing in it, and there's no infrastructure for it. You've literally got the pit. So that happened to me recently. I was just talking to a customer of mine because I was just down in a country town in my area, and same thing. They had to be NBN ready. Oh no, they bought the land from once it was subdivided, saying that it was NBN ready.
Yeah.
And that's how I knew about the pits, because all it is a pit with NBN on it, and then they had to pay same thing, $6 to $8 grand, because this is on a 2.5 acre property. $6 to $8 grand to get the cable run to the house, but more than that, because it's the pit's there but nothing's in it. So then to get it, so then he ended up he couldn't get it, so he had to do some sort of a wireless NBN kind of thing. So it's like ridiculous. It's like it's just money. He goes, all they're doing is money.
Yep. Now, how's that for destroying corruption? You get a pit in the ground for $5,500 with nothing in it, but the NBN is now able to show a profit at the end of the year. Now the thing is, this is what kills countries. because you're basically, I watched a program a long time ago about a lion that was killed by black flies. And these are blood-sucking flies that landed on it and started with its ears, and it had this, infection of the ear, and then they just basically sucked the blood out of it, and this lion died. And that's how countries die, when they become so corrupt that they get the life sucked out of them.
Yep.
And that's happening here. The rules and regulations that are going on all the time are changing all the time to just get money out of it by one means or another.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I was away, we have an all-electric condo. And by the way, it's not a small place. It was actually 2 condos. We knocked the walls down, took out one of the kitchens, and so it's a big place. And behind us is the mountains, and in front of us is the sea. So you can actually look at the mountains of the sea. And we actually, it's all electric. And we light it up at night for ships to navigate by. We look like Luna Park. And anyway, we got the bill for Vietnam, for this place. And we got the bill for here, which is running. We don't switch the TVs off because we need the electricity to go through and keep them going. We don't switch the fridge off. We keep that going. We got the security system going. My bill in Australia was about the same as for a fully occupied house, condo in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And there was nobody living here. The heating wasn't on. The water wasn't being heated. Nothing. The pilot light was on in the gas.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the numbers. We're saying that we're the most energy-rich country in the world, paying the most for it.
Yes, there we are.
It's crazy. Yeah.
By the way, when they blew up Pelican Point in South Australia, the power station there, and there was much cheering and carrying on, and the guy went out and pressed the clacker and sort of thing fell over. The operations manager at that place then moved to Vietnam, where he had the project of extending the Phu Mai power station. So the Vietnamese went, oh, okay, here's a guy who knows how to run power stations and build them. And so it's an ex-army officer, by the way. So they actually picked him up, came across there. And by the way, Phu Mai is the world. Don't forget, 7 hours electricity was all I got not so many years ago.
That's right.
Now, it's the 11th largest power station in the world. Fossil fuel power station in the world.
I was going to say, is it nuclear or fossil fuel?
It's entirely fossil fuels. And it supplies electricity to 25 million people. Stephen, quick question. What's the population of Australia?
27 million.
2 million will have to do without. They'll have to go green.
Far out.
Just crazy.
And I know, just one fossil fuel power station is powering Vietnam, you said. 25
No. There's 90 million people there. This is just the one that's 30 kilometers from me.
Oh, right.
And it supplies 25 million people because it supplies Vung Tau, where I live. It supplies all the people around from Warringah up to Saigon. And it provides Saigon, which has got about 13 million people alone.
Wow.
Fossil fuels get demonized so much, yet here's a story of them being used to lift up a country and lift their population out of, the dark ages, really.
Well, let me give you the example, actually. We've very, very rarely had a power outage. And normally they're scheduled. And about 4 years ago, we got a notification that the power system would be down for basically from 8 in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon, because they were upgrading the substation because so many people had put on Christmas lights, it was overloading the substation. So their solution was to build a bigger substation. And so they replaced this one in 8 hours with a bigger substation.
Wow.
It's just a module. They bring it in, they take one out, and put the other one in. So that, and if you ever go around Vung Tau at Christmas time, it's unbelievable the number of, I look up the street here, the number of people who've got on Christmas lights around my street. But in Vietnam, it is like Luna Park, the number of places that are lit up. And by the way, I don't know what religion you are, but I'm not particular. There's a cathedral just up the road from me. There's a little French church there. It's actually made of bluestone. And then the St. Joseph's, which was there when I was there in 1970, which is completely decorated. And they've actually just built a copy of Notre Dame from the original plans for Notre Dame, the one that burnt down in France.
Wow.
They've actually completed it. And so what you have is an exact replica of the one in France was actually built near Fumai.
Really?
Yeah. Identical. They used the original plans.
Can I just ask you a question? Because you do have a good perspective of what's happening in Vietnam. Is it the same level of climate hysteria and climate alarmism going on there, or is it this just an Australian
No, but unfortunately, the world government, the World Bank came in and offered them a bucket load of money to build wind farms in a country that basically doesn't have wind. I mean, the daily temperature I have is between 26 and 28, and sometimes in the hot season it gets up to 33. It's never got beyond 33, and there are no breezes. But they're now building some offshore because they've got the money out of the bank. I think somebody took a big bribe for this. And so they're going to put up these windmills offshore. But no, basically, they're not really concerned about climate change.
Yeah, fair enough.
They're concerned about real life things. We just built a brand new hospital. Sorry?
Like putting food on the table, and where am I going to get my health care from?
Well, they've just built a new hospital halfway between Vung Tau and Warringah. Big place. And it's fully stocked with everything, and it's even got... I mean, my doctor over there was trained in Melbourne University, Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And I managed to cut my finger right through to the bone. I didn't know that bone is actually white, because I can actually see it. And I went down there and he had a chat to me while he sewed it up for me. And no, I don't have any health insurance over there, but that cost me $6. And I went back 10 days later. Sorry?
$6.
Oh, I had to pay for it.
Oh, break the bank.
Yeah. I went back 10 days later. The cute little nurse actually took the things out and then gave me a free bottle of Macarthur because I didn't have it with.
They didn't even...
Oh.
Wow. And that was like $6.50.
Yeah, she could have charged me more, I suppose. Yeah, no, look, it's a great place to live. In fact, I'm lobbying the government not to let in any Australian refugees. The last thing I need is bloody, people coming to pollute the place.
Well, hopefully one day we won't be reaching out to you saying, can you let us in somehow?
Well, make sure you remember these faces because we'll be bringing our families along, it sounds like.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Look, thank you so much for coming on. You've given us a lot of your time.
Well, you'll have to edit a lot.
I've only got that one thing to edit out.
We're almost pushing a three-part series, so we better.
No, don't do that. No. Cut out all the chit chat. Get down to the serious stuff.
No, a lot of it was great. I feel like Adam and I have learnt so much on this episode, and we'd love to have you back because I know there's a whole bunch of other topics that we could talk to you about. So,
who's going to win in Ukraine?
Oh, we've been staying out of it. We've got no idea.
I don't know. I don't know enough about it to get involved. I wish I could have spoken to you a little bit more about that actually, because I really just don't have any perspective on it to even know who's right, who's wrong. I mean, war to me is wrong in the first place, and you know what I mean. Like,
hey, what are you trying to do? Do me out of a job?
No, well, I don't. But yeah.
Tired anyway, aren't you?
You know,
actually, I could answer that question, but I'll leave it. And the other one is China going to invade Taiwan?
Well, can you give us a yes and no for both of them, just to finish up? But you want to expand?
No.
No?
No, that's all right.
I'll leave you hanging on those two.
All right, okay. So, apart from the Quadrant, is there any other way that people can follow you? Let's see if they want to...
No, I don't use Facebook or any of these things. Interestingly enough, I typed my name in the other day and found quite a few articles of mine. I mean, as I said to you, I write for shelf behind you. Right, for strategy and tactics, World at War, Camaraderie. Published another article on the Coast Watchers in there. What's the next one? Wentworth Report. Haram Top Top, part of the Black Hand Gang from Papua New Guinea. Duntroon Society. I can't even read. Something. Can't read what that one is.
So in other words, the best thing to do is just type in Alistair Pope into a search.
Oh, you'll find something there.
You'll find something.
Royal United Service Institute, Quadrant Online. Anyway, what happens is that. And of course, I write quarterly for the ACCQ, the Australian Chess Correspondence Quarterly.
Yep,
Correspondence Chess Quarterly.
And that's where the real passion is.
Sorry?
That's where the real passion is, in chess.
It is, actually. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you very much for coming on, Alistair. And one day I want to see a chess game between you and Adam. But the only catch is you've got 4 moves to beat him in.
No, it'll take a bit longer than that.
No, I think you can do it in 2. Honestly,
I'll tell
you move the pawn up your 2 spots, and then the knight will do something crazy, and I'll be out. I'll be just like checkmate.
Well, look, there's a book coming out in Spanish. It's due out on the 1st of December, but I haven't been notified of it yet. So it should be out by now. And I asked them. They've actually published 2 of my games. One is when I beat the world champion, Max Erver, and the other one is when I beat the 7 times US champion, Grandmaster Paul Benko.
Oh, wow.
So they're both being published in this book, but it's actually in Spanish.
Oh.
I don't buy a copy.
Yeah, buy a copy. That's awesome.
Well, I'm sure you'll be able to learn Spanish. I wouldn't put it past you. But thank you very much for coming on. And if you enjoyed this episode, it's a 2-part episode. Please, share it to your friends, your family, even your enemies.
Well, I'll wait until you put it up, and I'll listen to what you've edited out first before I give it to anyone.
Not much editing. Don't worry, there won't be much.
Take a lot of the chit chat out.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Okay.